Hello everyone! Today we're going to continue computer graphic course, and today's topic: drawing lines and curves, outline and object fill. This lesson will guide by seminar teacher Domina Inessa Anatolievna. Today we'll learn three sections: how to work with lines, what differences in between freehand tool, Bezier tool, artistic media tool, and dimension lines, how to work with outlines, formatting lines and outlines, and objects wheel with color, working with color palettes. In the previous lesson we talked about how to create transformable objects and convert them to curves. We also talked about the types of nodes and what tool to manipulate them. The next section of this seminar is a continuation of the previous topic. Next, we will talk about how to create lines, what types of lines are available in the CorelDRAW program. This lesson discusses techniques for drawing all kinds of lines. As a rule, it is working with lines that is most difficult for CorelDRAW new users. The reason for this is not the difficulty of mastering in using the program's toolkit, but a lack of understanding of the models with which lines are represented in the image. After all, action on the lines, of which consists, for example, facial image in the portrait and dimensional diagram in the figure, significantly different from each other. In the previous lesson, we have already covered several classes of graphic objects. In this lesson, we'll focus on such objects classes as a curved dimension line, interactive connector line, and artistic media group. You will learn how they work and learn how to build them. Also, we'll learn objects outline and object fill types. Curved line or free form is located in the drawing panel on the left side by default and is invoked with F5 function key. In keeping with the general style of the CorelDRAW user interface, the Curve tool button displays an icon for the last used tool with buttons on its toolbar, and clicking the button reactivates the same tool. Just as when choosing a tool for constructing a graphic primitive to access the buttons of other tools, it is enough to click on the button Curve tool and hold down the mouse button. Lines and Freehand tool. The freehand tool converts the mouse path to a curve. In this case, nodes and line segments are formed automatically in accordance with the specified parameters of the freehand tool, which should not be changed without special need. As however, one should not expect very good results from the use of this tool. The fact is that drawing with a mouse, not to mention a trackball and a touchpad, and drawing with a pencil or ballpoint pen are not at all the same, and even for the most experienced draftsman cannot create a masterpiece in this way. Graphic tablets have recently appeared equipped with a quite traditional pen, which responds not only to movements on the surface of the tablets, but also to press and force. The use of such tablets significantly improves the quality of freehand lines with the freehand tool. Unfortunately, a graphic tablet is not cheap and has a number of limitations. In any case, the lines drawn by the freehand tool, freehand curve, require further adjustment. To make sure of this and to master the techniques of working with the tool along the way, you need to perform the following exercises. Select the freehand tool from the Curve toolbar. The mouse pointer will take the shape corresponding to the selected tool. Click and drag the pointer to draw the desired closed curve, starting with the rounding. At the moment the mouse pointer approaches the point at which the construction of the curve began, the tool pointer will change its shape. If you release the mouse button at this moment, a closed curve will be drawn, and if early, an open curve. Note: if in the process of drawing the curved line went wrong without releasing the mouse button, press and hold the Shift key. Now, by dragging the pointer along the already drawn line in the opposite direction, you can erase the failed area. After releasing the Shift key, drawing can continue from the last unerased node. Second, you will most likely rate the result as unsatisfactory. Nevertheless, it needs to be investigated. First, pay attention on the status bar. A message appears there that an object belonging to the class of curves was selected, and it was indicated how many nodes were obtained in it. On the constructed curve, those nodes are visible, and the role of the initial node is played by the one of which the curve is closed. Select the Shape tool in the toolbox and click it on any of the nodes. Then read the message on the status bar. Then successfully pressing the Tab key, move the selection to the next nodes of the curve, finding out their tab according to the message in the status bar. As a result of the study, the following conclusions can be drawn. Nodes and segments of the curve when working with the freehand tool, freehand curve, are created automatically. Most of the nodes created are breakpoints, and most of the segments you create are curved. As you become familiar with the freehand tool, you are convinced that its capabilities are not very great. Experienced users often use another tool, Bezier, when drawing lines. Working with the Bezier tool, or Bezier curve, the user doesn't try to reproduce the curved line with the mouse. Instead, he sets the position of the nodes of the future curve and gets the opportunity already in the process of building effect, the direction points in each of them. The techniques for working with this tool are more complex and require some training to master, but the results are much better than using the freehand tool, as will become apparent in the next exercise. Nevertheless, curves drawn with the Bezier tool often have to be adjusted using the techniques described in previous, but such adjustments, as a rule, don't take much time. Constructing a curve with the Bezier tool is a sequence of cycles of work with each of the curve nodes. The cycle begins by placing the tool pointer at the location of the future node. Then the user presses the mouse button and while holding it, refines the position of the guide points by dragging one of them with the mouse. First away from the node and then around it. By default, symmetric nodes are created. But if the user at the time of releasing the mouse button uses the modifier key, a smoothed node or breakpoint will be created. When the mouse button is released, the type of the node and the position of the direction points are fixed, after which the cycle for determining the next node begins. To exit the loop, press the space bar. Note: in the process of creating a breakpoint, hold down the C key, the initial character of the English term cusp, denoting this type of notes. In this case, the keyboard should work in the Latin alphabet input mode. After pressing the modifier key, the direction points begin to behave in accordance with the selected note type, and further dragging with the mouse will affect only on one of them. To create a smoothed node, use the S modifier key, from the English smooth. Variable width lines and the Artistic Media tool. Using the Artistic Media tool or Superline, composite objects of the Superline class are built. Each of these objects consists of two parts: a line that plays the role of a control object and defines the main parameters of the form of a composite object as a whole, and a subordinate object that defines the details of this form. A closed curve or even an arbitrary CorelDRAW object can act as a subordinate object, and both the control line and the subordinate object can be constructed both in advance and during the construction of the superline. The realization of such a wide range of possibilities is provided by the ability of the Artistic Media tool or Superline to work in several modes. Only construction techniques differ, and the final structure of the composite object, the superline, remains unchanged. Whichever mode we use, the result obtained will belong to the same class, which will allow them to be edited in the same way. The choice of the working modes of the Artistic Media tool is performed using the Attributes panel, which after selecting it in the toolbox. Here we can see commands preset, brush, sprayer, calligraphic, and pressure buttons to switch the tool modes. The freehand smoothing slider box allows you to adjust the frequency at which nodes are created and therefore the smoothness of the control line of the connected object when drawn freehand. The Artistic Media tool width counter contains a value that determines the maximum width of the subordinate object when drawing the superline. In the preset drop-down list, select the schema of the subordinate object when working in the stock mode. Let's see the modes of work with the Artistic Media tool and their features. Calligraphy mode. Calligraphy mode is the simplest and most understandable mode of the Artistic Media tool, since the user's actions in this mode do not differ from his work with the freehand tool. When you drag the tool pointer along a defined path, the path is fixed as a control line of the compound object, and the value of the smooth control parameters is taken into account. However, after the end of dragging, after releasing the mouse button, another object is automatically drawn, a closed curve. Its shape is determined by the shape of the control line, and the characteristic of the calligraphic pen, the width, set by the line width counter, and the slope, which is set by the value of the calligraphic angle counter, which replaces the template in the calligraphy mode in the Attributes panel. The midpoint of a calligraphic pen of a given width and with a given slope to the horizon is set to the start node of the control line, and then moves along it while maintaining the slope. A subordinate object is a closed curve made up of paths formed at the start and end position of the pen and the path along which its edges moved. This example shows a composite object drawn in calligraphy mode. On the left, it is selected using the Shape tool by clicking on the axis of the object, after which it can be edited. On the right is viewer of the object after changing the tilt of the calligraphy pen. Instead of 0, the value was 60. Brush mode. In the brush mode of the Artistic Media tool, the subordinate object is not drawn along the direction line, but only deforms in accordance with its shape and the specified superline width. The starting material for deformation is the strokes, images saved in special CMX format in the Custom Media Strokes folder, nested in the folder where CorelDRAW was installed. The essence of deformation is that a smear image is stretched or compressed so that its length equals the length of the control line of the connected object, and its height equals the specified width of the superline. The stroke is then curved to match the shape of the direction line. The techniques for drawing a superline in brush mode are exactly the same as in the preset mode. To save an image as a stroke, select it with the Pick tool, then select the Artistic Media tool, turn on brush mode, and click on the button to save image as a stroke in the Attributes bar. By specifying the name of the file in which the stroke will be saved in the dialog box that opens, you can use a new stroke to create superlines. Spray mode. The spray mode of the Artistic Media tool forms not one subordinate object, but an entire group of objects, placing copies of a predefined image or its individual parts. Spray pattern. Along the direction line. Two superlines resulting from the use of the connected objects are shown in the example. In both cases, the control curve is the same and the spray pattern are different. However, such composite objects can only be classified as lines with a very big stretch. The functionality of the spray mode is broad enough. In particular, it is possible to control the size of individual image fragments included in the spray pattern, the parameters that determine their position on the control line, the sequence of the fragments. CorelDRAW comes with a variety of spray patterns for impressive decorative effects. A mechanism of replenishing the number of templates is also provided. Most often superlines built in spray mode are used to form original frames and backgrounds. Elements of drawings and diagrams. Certain classes of CorelDRAW objects are used mainly in the construction of special images, drawing diagrams, flowcharts. As a rule, images of this kind are constructed in accordance with a whole system of conventions, sometimes even regulated by standards. To achieve full compliance with the registration of images, such standards allow Design's Automation System (CAD), to which belong software such as AutoCAD. CorelDRAW belongs to another class of graphic programs, illustrative graphic systems, and it can't be required to comply with the above standards. But if when preparing an illustrating catalog, you need to apply the overall dimensions of the product to the image or indicate its individual parts with the help of leaders, CorelDRAW will cope with this work, and there are powerful enough tools to complete it. Dimension lines. Selecting the Dimension tool on the Curved toolbar makes it possible to use not one tool, but a whole group of tools for drawing in the image various dimensional schemes, consisting of extension lines, the actual dimension line and the dimensional inscription, and extension lines. Dimension schemes and extension lines are composite objects of the following classes: linear dimension, angle dimension, and callout. Drawing dimension lines. You can draw dimension lines to indicate the distance between 2 points in a drawing or the size of objects. You can add several types of dimension lines. Parallel dimension lines measure the actual distance between 2 nodes. Vertical or horizontal dimension lines measure the vertical y-axis or horizontal x-axis distance between any 2 nodes. Angular dimension lines measure angles. Segment dimension lines measure the linear distance between the end nodes of a segment or the linear distance between the 2 most distant nodes in multiple segments. Segments dimension lines can also measure selected successive segments. You can set how dimension text and lines are displayed. For example, you can choose the unit of measurement, specify the position and font of the dimension units, and add a prefix or suffix to dimension text. You can also set default values for all new dimension lines that you create. You can customize the extension lines on which dimension lines rest. You can specify the distance between the extension lines and the objects that is measured and the length of the extension overhang. Extension overhang is the portion of the extension line that falls beyond the dimension arrows. By default, dimension text is dynamic. If you resize the object to which a dimension line is attached, the dimension text is updated automatically to display the new size. You can make the dimension text static, however, if necessary. To be able to use dimension lines with precision, you need to snap them to specific nodes in objects. Formatting lines and outlines. Lines are treated the same way as outlines of closed shapes, such as ellipses and polygons. In some programs, outlines are known as strokes or thick lines. You can change the appearance of both lines and outlines by using the control in the Outline section of the Object Properties Docker, the Outline pane dialog box, and the property bar. For example, you can specify the color, width, and style of lines and outlines. You can choose a corner style to control the corner shape in lines and choose a line cap style to change the appearance of a line's endpoints. By default, an outline is applied on top of an object's fill, but you can apply it behind the fill, with the fill overlapping the outline. You can also link the outline thickness to an object size, so that the outline increases when you increase the object size and decreases when you decrease the object size. In addition, you can set the outline to print on top of underlying colors without removing them during printing. You can set the meter limit to determine the corner shape in objects containing lines that meet at sharp angles. Corners with angles above the meter limit are metered. Corners with angles below the meter limit are beveled squared off. In addition, you can specify the position of the outline by placing it outside or inside the object or centering it so that it overlaps equally the outside and the inside of an object. The effect of outline position option are more obvious with thick outlines. The default line and outline properties for each new object that you draw are as follows: hairline width, black color, solid line, square corner and line cap styles, centered outline, no arrowheads applied, outline applied on top of an object's fill, outline not linked to an object size. However, you can change any of these default line and outline properties at any time. You can create calligraphic outlines. A calligraphic outline varies in thickness, creating the effect of a handmade drawing. Working with color. CorelDRAW lets you choose and create colors by using a wide variety of industry-standard color palettes, color mixers, and color models. You can store frequently used colors for future use by using the document palette or creating and editing custom color palettes. You can customize how a color palette appears on your screen by changing the size of swatches, the number of rows, and other properties. Color models provide a precise method for defining colors, each model defining color through the use of specific color components. There is a range of color models to choose from when creating graphics, like CMYK color model or RGB color model or HSB color model. You can choose fill and outline colors by selecting a color from the document palette, custom color palettes, palettes from the palette libraries, color viewers, or color blends. When you want to use a color that already exists in an object or document, you can sample the color by using the color eyedropper tool to achieve an exact match. Default color palette. A color palette is a collection of color swatches. In some programs, color palettes are known as swatch palettes. In CorelDRAW, the default color palette is based on the primary color mode of the document. For example, if the document's primary color model is RGB, the default color palette is also RGB. For more information, you have to understand color models. You choose the default color model when you create a new drawing. You can open and use additional color palettes at any time. You can choose both fill and outline colors by using the default color palette. The selected fill and outline colors appear in the color swatches on the status bar. Document palette. When you create a new drawing, the application automatically generates an empty palette, called the document palette. It helps you keep track on the colors that you use by storing them with your document for future use. Palette libraries and custom color palettes. The color palettes that are found in the palette libraries can be edited directly. Some of them are provided by third-party manufacturers, for example, Pantone, HKS Colors, and TrueMatch. It may be useful to have on hand a manufacturer's swatchbook which is a collection of color samples that shows exactly what each color looks like when printed. Some palettes found in the palette libraries, Pantone, HKC, Colors, TOYO, DIC, are collection of spot colors. If you create color separations, when you print, each spot color requires a separate printing plate, which can significantly affect the cost of the printing job. Sampling colors. When you want to use a color that already exists in a drawing palette or on your desktop, you can sample the color to achieve an exact match. By default, you sample a single pixel from the drawing window. Now we'll turn into practical part. Look at these pictures attentional. Here you can see pictures. At first glance it seems that it's simple to create, but here are collected all the exercises, the topics of which we went through in those lessons. Try to remember all the points which we learned and repeat these exercises. And on this point we'll finish our seminar. See you later.